Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping into a world where absolutely everything is wonderfully, completely upside down. We are unpacking Natalie Jones' classic piece of nonsense poetry, A Funny Man. Now, if you're the kind of focused learner who just loves discovering how words can playfully scramble our brains and maybe make us smile along the way, well, you are in the exact right place. Let's figure out together exactly how this poem works its magic.
So let's kick things off with a seemingly impossible question. Have you ever seen a funny-sounding sight? I mean, really think about that for a second. You can't visually see a sound, right? But that is exactly the secret sauce of nonsense poetry. It takes the rules of logic, the things our brains just automatically expect to happen, and playfully throws them right out the window. It totally scrambles our expectations to create something entirely new and delightful.
Section 1. Meet the Funny Man, a guided tour of the absurd. Okay, let's dive into this. The poem opens with this beautifully bizarre image. It reads, "One day, a funny kind of man came walking down this street. He wore a shoe upon his head and hats upon his feet." Instantly, the poet gives us a perfectly clear, utterly ridiculous picture. I mean, we know immediately this guy doesn't follow the rules of normal society. His clothes are on entirely wrong, which really sets the perfect stage for the absolute silliness that's about to follow. But pay close attention to how he behaves here. The next lines go, "He raised the shoe and smiled at me. His manners were polite, but never had I seen before such a funny-sounding sight." And this brilliantly illustrates the core joke of the whole poem. He's tipping his hat to be polite, except, obviously, the hat is actually a shoe on his head. Despite this completely absurd visual situation, his manners are flawlessly maintained. The narrator is stunned, calling him a funny-sounding sight, which totally kicks off that brilliant sensory confusion we were just talking about.
Then, he decides to give a gift. He said, "Allow me to present your highness with a rose." And taking out a currant bun, he held it to my nose. Notice the extreme formality here. He acts playfully bewildered, calling the narrator your highness, and formally promising a beautiful, delicate rose. But what does he actually shove under the narrator's nose? A baked good, a literal currant bun. The sheer disconnect between his highly formal words and his completely ridiculous actions is just absolute comedy gold.
Naturally, the narrator is a bit taken aback by getting a pastry right to the face. The poem continues, "I staggered back against the wall, and then I answered, 'Well, I never saw a rose with such a funny-looking smell.'" The narrator is so shocked and confused by this encounter that their own senses are starting to get entirely mixed up too. They've suddenly encountered this impossible concept of a looking smell. It's like the funny man's nonsense is practically contagious.
So how does this strange encounter end? He then began to sing a song and sat down on the ground. You never heard in all your life such a funny feeling sound. There's no grand exit, no logical conclusion. He simply plops down in the dirt and sings a song that you can somehow uniquely feel. It's odd for sure, but a remarkably joyful and peaceful way to end this whole bizarre interaction.
Section 2. Decoding the nonsense. What does it actually mean? If you're scratching your head a bit, let's unpack this clever puzzle. Now, to really appreciate the humor here, we need to make sure we understand a couple of specific words so we know exactly what the narrator was physically experiencing. First up, let's look at the word staggered. To stagger means to move unsteadily or fall back in surprise. When the funny man suddenly thrusts food into the narrator's face instead of a delicate flower, the narrator literally staggers back against the wall. It's this immediate physical reaction to sheer, utter surprise. It paints such a hilarious mental picture of someone being totally caught off guard by absurdity in their daily life. And what exactly caused that surprise? Well, a currant bun. Now, a currant bun is a small, sweet bread roll containing tiny, seedless raisins called currants. Basically, it's a sticky, sweet bakery item. It is literally the absolute furthest thing you could imagine from a fresh, thorny, fragrant rose. By understanding exactly what this physical object is, we can fully grasp how incredibly bizarre it is to formally present it as a flower. Now, what's really interesting to see here is the incredible comedic juxtaposition happening. On one hand, you have the deeply formal text, "Allow me to present your highness with a rose." We expect elegance, right? We expect romance, or at least polite high society. But the reality of what's actually happening, offering a sticky currant bun instead, completely shatters that expectation. This clash between what is elegantly said and what is awkwardly done is the very foundation of the poem's humor. Section 3, politeness in silly situations. The comedic engine of the poem. Let's look at how this actually works. The humor here doesn't just come from random chaotic silliness. It relies heavily on carefully subverting our everyday, deeply ingrained expectations. Look at how the poet handles the senses. In the normal world, we see sights, we smell smells, and we hear sounds. But in the poem's mixed-up world, we get a sounding sight, a looking smell, and a feeling sound. The poet deliberately scrambles these sensory experiences. By throwing these words together in ways that totally defy physical logic, Natalie June creates a delightfully upside-down world where nothing functions the way our brains want it to. So the crucial point is this sharp contrast. On one side, we have his wildly absurd actions, wearing a shoe on his head, offering a sticky bun instead of a flower, singing a song while just sitting on the ground. But on the other side, his words and his demeanor are absolutely flawless. He smiles politely, he tips his shoe hat, he addresses the narrator as Your Highness. The poem is essentially making us ask, how do we react when absolute, pure nonsense is presented to us with perfect, formal manners? Section 4, the power of imagination. Why we need nonsense. Let's move to and see how this builds to our final takeaways. So, why do we even read nonsense poetry in the first place? Well, a poem like A Funny Man actually serves a few really wonderful purposes. First, it completely embraces playfulness and pure joy. It gives our brains a much-needed break from all those rigid, everyday rules. Second, it deliberately defies logic and expectations, which is honestly a fantastic workout for our imagination. And third, in its own weird little way, it teaches us to maintain polite manners. I mean, if the funny man can be perfectly polite while wearing a shoe on his head, we can certainly be polite in our daily lives, right? Ultimately, it's a masterclass that celebrates the boundless, limitless power of the human imagination. And that leaves us with a final, provocative thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. How can you bring a little bit of polite, joyful nonsense into your own day? Maybe it's just looking at something ordinary from a totally bizarre angle, or simply remembering to smile and keep your manners when things in life don't quite go as expected. Keep that imagination wide open. Never lose your sense of wonder, and always remember the funny man. Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep learning, keep smiling, and I'll catch you in the next one.